Good morning. Welcome back to our study in the Gospel of John. Today, we will, I always say this, but we're getting to chapter 7. Again, I want to kind of do a couple of quick summaries of important things. So we're going to come across this phrase, the beginning, in our chapter, and we want to remember how the prologue begins in the beginning. So we want to keep in mind everything we have up to this point. We have this prologue about this logos, because we're going to get logos brought up again. We have a witness within that prologue, a martus, and that concept of witness is going to get brought up again. We have references to light, which will be brought up again in chapter 8. We are recapitulating a number of themes here, but we are recapitulating them in the context of the temple. So we're going to be in the temple in these two chapters. And I've already pointed out the importance of a lot of temple themes, including the creation themes. Okay? I've observed that we are dealing with the issue of sacred violence. I mean, it is very, very hard to unsee the connections between violence and the sacred that Girard has established, and really to see that the gospel writers are the ones, and Jesus, of course, the gospel writers inspired by the Spirit of Jesus, and Jesus himself historically, that have created this breach in human thinking. And we call that revelation. So we're going to see these temple themes, creation themes, temple themes. But again, we've got the Jesus-Moses parallelism. Remember from the prologue, Torah comes through Moses, grace and truth come through Jesus. When you look at chapters 6, 7, and 8, now you've already had mention of water to wine. You've already seen the potential Exodus motif from water to blood, and then, of course, water to wine in the Johannine author's connection of water, wine, and blood. Okay, we've seen that. We've seen that there's an intense sacramental rendering of all this in chapter 6 with regard to bread and manna, Moses in the wilderness and the manna. In chapter 8, we're going to have direct reference to the light of the world, and we're going to see that around this whole Feast of Tabernacles thing that's happening here, Feast of Booths, Sukkoth, where you have the giant candelabras in the temple. We're going to read what the rabbis say about these candelabras being able to light up the whole city of Jerusalem. We're going to talk about the water motifs of John 7:37 to 39. So if you've read the Jesus-driven life, you're going to have a kind of a repeat here of that little piece. But we're also, you've got, again, manna, bread of life. You've got Shekinah glory, light of the world. But in John 7, you're going to have the living rock, the water from the rock that gets struck, and we're going to see how that motif plays. And so you've got this Jesus-Moses parallelism, creation themes, temple themes, issues related to sacred violence. The whole point of Jesus saying that God, the God they believe in, is not his Father, because if they believed in his Father, they would believe him, but they don't. And there's, again, all the agency motifs that are being played out here, and we don't have to think necessarily in metaphysical terms. We can think in terms of agency and mimesis. That's really key here, because a good anthropological reading avoids so many of the silly philosophical questions that get asked then. Well, how is Jesus like God? Well, what is a God? A God is this, 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 this. Then we try to jam Jesus into these definitions. It doesn't work. We need to allow Jesus to redefine all these categories, and that's what this author does by placing God on a cross, just as Paul did, just as the Markan writer does, just as the Luke and Matthew writers do. Come on. Put a God on a cross. That's intense. And they all do this. Okay. So we have these themes in the structure. There's movement. We've seen that people are trying to figure out who Jesus is, and in the first chapter they begin naming him with all these categories, and Jesus himself, as in the synoptic tradition, takes upon himself the category of ho huios tu anthropou, or just huios anthropou, and arthrously, also in the Gospel of John. Whether or not that's substantively different is a matter of debate, but the Son of Man. Again, the Son of Man only appears on Jesus' lips, as in the synoptic tradition. and functions in some important ways. But at any rate, you've got all of this coming together. Now we're going to get to this intense piece of the courtroom drama. And I've told you that a number of Johannine scholars really read the Gospel of John as this kind of almost legal text. That is, it's the document for the defense. It's the Spirit's witness to Jesus. That's what this is. And we are watching a trial unfold, the trial of a person's life, a human being's life. It's unfolding. And this human being is claiming to be related directly to the one we know as God, what we call God, but he's certainly not acting and behaving like what we know as God or we call God. And we have issues with him. All of us do. Jew, Gentile, it doesn't matter. Atheist, zealot, believer. Everybody has issues with Jesus at some point, and often lots of points. He creates that crisis in us, that judgment in us that forces us to ask questions about ourselves and our neighbor and life, the Father, the character of God. That's all happening here in this text. He's overturning a theological belief system, okay? A way of conceiving the character of God. But Jesus never talks about God as God. He always talks about God as his papa. God is my papa. God is my father. God is my daddy. God is my papa. I prefer papa. It has more respect. Daddy is like, daddy. God is my daddy. God is my boyfriend. Not so sure. Papa denotes more respect, I think. But at any rate, certainly in English. However you want to do it, it certainly, isn't, daddy's a cuddly bear, okay? Come on. Get over yourself. Show some respect for the creator of the universe as well. Abba also refers to the elders of the village that sit at the gate, pass judgments that are brought before the community. Don't forget that. Anyway, so we move from this intense Eucharistic discourse we just went through, where Jesus is tying all of this now to cannibalism, or the gospel writer is. I'm of course concede that we have here a structured text by the gospel writer, again reflecting on this event of the feeding of the 5,000, as well as the whole bread discourse that gets brought up, and then of course now in his community life, reflecting on everything that's taking place within that community in the light of this Eucharistic meal, in the light of these texts. They're all woven together. This author is extraordinarily skilled. Okay? Now, when you get through chapter 6, as I pointed out before, it's the center of the 7 miracles. In a chiastic structure, it's miracle number 4. And it's the wedding at Cana and the cross are 1 and 7. Remember that? 2 is the nobleman's son. 6 is the raising of Lazarus from the dead, both having to do with death. And then, of course, 3 is the healing of the lame man at the pool on the Sabbath. And 9 is the healing of the blind man on the Sabbath. So bang, bang, we're dealing with controversies related to holiness codes, people. And I've been over this and over this and over this with you. Now, why is this important? Religion has 3 pillars, according to René Girard: prohibition, ritual, and myth. You can always tell a religion by what it prohibits, the rituals it engages in, and the mythology it creates about itself. Let me give you an example. So I remember I grew up Roman Catholic. We had our prohibitions. You don't eat meat on Friday. Eat meat on Friday. That's an example. We had our rituals. You go to confession every Saturday. You go to Mass every Sunday. We had our myth. We were the true church. And there were, as I grew up Catholic, of course, I knew there were like other kind of churches, but I didn't know anything about them. I didn't know about Protestantism. I just knew there were these like weird churches. Didn't know anything about them. Grew up thinking we were, Catholic was it. But when I became Baptist, well, I got new prohibitions. We don't drink alcohol. We don't have sex before marriage, yada, yada, yada. We have rituals we engage in. We come to church every Sunday. We come to church every Sunday night. We go to church every Wednesday night. We join the choir. We join the band. We do our daily devotions every day. We read our Bible every day. We pray every day. We get all kinds of rituals. If you're a Protestant, holy cow, man, they over-ritualize your life. And then they commercialize all those rituals in Bible bookstores, and pretty soon you filled your home and your ears and your eyes with everything Christianese, and you're just a Christian consumer. Holy cow, forget about it. Alrighty then, so moving on. Then there's myth. Then the Baptists had this great myth, man. They were part of this, little dissenting stream all through the history of the church, and they traced themselves back. They'd kind of bounce back, through Finney and then to Calvin, Wesley and Calvin and Luther, and they'd bounce back to Huss, and then blam, all the way back to Augustine, as though nothing happened between Augustine and Huss kind of thing. And, of course, back to Paul and blah, blah, blah. That was their myth. Religion as prohibition, ritual, and myth. And Jesus is going to run into trouble at every point. He's already challenged the major center of ritual in John 2, at the beginning of his ministry, in this prophetic acting in the temple, that is going to interestingly enough, create now these scenarios around whose authority. By whose authority are you doing these things all through this gospel? Whose authority? Who gave you the right to come in and disturb our religion? Jesus does the same thing today in Christendom. Don't you think for a moment that this is a Christian reading that's anti-Judaic? Jesus as a Jew was not anti-Judaic. Jesus really did seek the healing of his people. You must never forget that. Christian supersessionist readings of a text like this are going to tend to be anti-Semitic. We don't want to do that. That's key. What we have to recognize is that the same Jesus that is in this text historically and in the life of this community as a lived community in the spirit of Jesus is also with us and challenges our religion at every turn. Our prohibitions, our rituals, and our mythologies, all of our triumphalism, conservative and liberal, Catholic and Protestant and Orthodox, and everything, Anabaptist, you name it. Jesus is not against Christianity, as Jack Sparks liked to say. Jesus loves his bride, his church, his body, those that have given themselves to his lordship, so to speak. And I'm not talking about institutional church. I'm talking about those that are on the path and the journey, this path, this journey. They've come to this place in the miracle tradition where they recognize that in this Eucharistic practice, they are now not just rendering this mosaically, that is, Jesus is superior to Moses, Jesus' authority is superior to Moses' authority. This now, Jesus in the Eucharistic narrative takes us all the way back. Jesus has authority over the victimage mechanism that we human beings have established. I mean, we're talking, quote, paganism. All of humanity, the human species, this writer has taken us from the Logos concept in John 1 in a very clear rendering of Genesis 1 with deep connections to Greek philosophy now in John 6. Deep connections to the Moses tradition and yet rendered universal with regard to the human species. I mean, there is more anthropology here in this gospel than you can begin to imagine, think, or believe. It's exposing everything about us. Now, in this trial, you see, Jesus is exposing these things, and his interlocutors, who, as I pointed out, David Bentley Hart renders hoi Judaioi as the Judeans. We really do need to be careful when we see the phrase the Jews, like I'm about to read in the New International Version, we are reading the Judeans. We're talking about a specific type of authority. Okay? Because we're going to see that authority manifest itself within the Pharisaic group that's engaged in the temple. Not necessarily the Sanhedrin at this point, but certainly enough Pharisees, religious authorities like Nicodemus, who's going to come back into play here. So here we are now. We've turned a corner. and we are about to come to a courtroom scene that is, if you have opportunity ever to pick up Joanne Brandt's commentary on the Gospel of John, it's a rather wonderful, remarkable literary commentary on this gospel. I really have enjoyed her work, and I'm going to use it today again, just as I did with regard to Nicodemus, because I think the work she does on discourse analysis is excellent, easy to understand, and remarkably fluid or coherent with the work the reading that I'm offering as a mimetic reading, as we'll see in a moment. So now here we are. I hope all this is on YouTube, Jerry. Yes, it is. Robert Jimenez takes these and he puts them over on YouTube. Just type in Michael Hardin, Gospel of John, and it'll pop up all of them. Thank you, Martin King. Thank you. Hi, Michelle. Hey, nice to see you. I think about you a lot in some of those tough situations you're going through. So, yeah, all the best. John, hi. Dan Hinkle, you should give me a buzz. We need to get together, buddy. All right, here we are. Sorry, I'll leave the greetings for now. Let's get to John 7. Shall we? So I have your Bibles, right? I'm looking at the New International Version, and so we've come off this Eucharistic narrative, this cannibalistic narrative. We've whittled it down from 5,000 to some crowds to some interlocutors to just the 12, and Jesus goes, even one of you is a devil, you know. I mean, it's as though whatever Jesus is doing and saying and showing and revealing here, it just, the masses flee. And this is, you got to get this. The true gospel will never, ever, ever, ever be massive. Okay? It can't be. It's yeast, people. It's not dough. It's yeast. Okay? Man, straight is the gate, narrow is the way, and it has nothing to do with whether you're going to burn in hell or not. It has to do with listening to the Father. Jesus is the whole point of this gospel here. And Jesus is going, I'm the one that listens to the Father. We're going to see this. It's beautiful. Let's get into this. So, chapter 7. After this, Jesus went around in Galilee, purposely staying away from Judea because the Judean authorities there were waiting to take his life. Okay, now remember, John 6. Feeds 5,000. Crowd wants to make him king. Eucharistic narrative. Bang. This is it. You know, who do people think I am? You're going to leave too. Very, very similar to the synoptic turning point of the feeding of the 5,000. Then this strange flight to Caesarea Philippi, which turns out to be, who do people think I am? Some think you're the Davidic Messiah. Well, they should make, you know, Jesus go, no, you got it all wrong. I am the suffering Son of Man. That's the first time the suffering Son of Man gets brought up. So we have this same structure here. Jesus now knows. The crowd wants to make him king of an, and remember, we're talking, you got to think here, 5,000 men, that's an army, right? Okay. Crowd wants to make him this king. Word has got out. The Judean authorities have a vested interest in this, don't they? Because remember, if for a while there in Judaism, during the Hasmonean dynasty, the king and the high priest were the same figure. There were real issues about that with regard to the temple. Real issues. At any rate, here's a king, but there's already a king in the land, and that's Herod. Now, some people don't like Herod. Herod's not exactly well-liked, you know, but he's king. Caesar recognizes Herod. So, you know, if the crowd sees Jesus as king, Jesus knows he's in trouble, boom. You know, he's not going to want to go show his face, is he? Now, here's the thing. We're going to move into this text, and I think it's signaling us on a number of levels about some fun stuff. Jesus wanders around Galilee. He's just staying away from Judea because, just, you know, he just doesn't want trouble. Wants to stay alive. That's good. Okay. When the Jewish Feast of Tabernacles, or Booths, Sukkoth, was near, Jesus' brother said to him, you ought to leave here, go to Judea, so your disciples may see the miracles you do. No one who wants to become a public figure acts in secret. Since you're doing these things, show yourself to the world. For even his own brothers did not believe in him. Now, at this point, you notice I've misread the text. I've misintonated it. I started reading this text like they're being kind and nice. No, the author gives you a signal in that last verse, in verse 5. For even his own brothers did not believe in him. We are dealing here with sarcasm. Okay? We need to read it that way. When the Jewish feast of tabernacles was near, Jesus' brothers said to him, man, yeah, leave her, dude. Go to Judea. See your disciples. You got disciples in Judea, buddy. Go see your disciples there. Do all those miracles there. Yeah, do them publicly. Do them openly. Go ahead. You get yourself killed. Go ahead. We dare you to do it. We really dare you. They didn't believe in him. Now, that's a bit of a paraphrase here of what's happening, but it's the term parousia. Again, I'm taking some of this information from Joanne Brandt's fine book, commentary. The term parousia, openly, boldly, has to do with frankness and candor. Just say it. Say it. Say I'm God. Say it. Do it. Do it in front of the people. Blaspheme. It's a temptation. Okay? It's a test, in a sense. And I find it also interesting here in verse 2 that the sarcasm is directed to Jesus' disciples in Judea, almost in a derogatory manner. Okay? Because remember, Jesus is wandering around Galilee. Who's going to be wandering with him? The 12. Right? They're not down there in Judea doing something. They're not from there. They're from up north. So they're hanging out with Jesus. One moment. All right. So Jesus, there's this feast coming up. It's one of the 3 big feasts. Passover, Day of Atonement, Tabernacles. Says you gotta go down to this feast. You gotta show all these signs. Jesus says the right time for me has not yet come. Now we've already established the term hour, ora, and time, kairos. They refer to the hour, the time, the event of the cross. Okay? In the Gospel of John, that's what they refer to. The right time has not yet come for me, or my hour has not yet come in other places in the Gospel. For you, any time is right. Any time is right for what? If my time refers to Jesus' death, what is he saying? For you, any time is right. Death is right any time. The world cannot hate you. The world can't hate you guys. You don't get it. You're of the world. You want me to go prove myself so I'll get killed. That is, your time is always about death. That's all you're about. This is not my time. And the world can't hate you because, you're right there with them. You're right there with these interlocutors. You're going to be right there in the same place as the Pharisees later in the chapter. That's where you're at. The world can't hate you, but it hates me. Because I testify that what it does is evil. You go to the feast. And then he says, I am not yet going up to this feast. Now, the verb here, anabino, again in the Gospel of John, has a double meaning. Because Mount Zion is a mount, the verb anabino, to go up to Jerusalem, to go up to the temple. Okay, that's the verb that's used. I'm going up to the temple. You might say in English, I'm going to church. But if you lived in Jesus' day in Greek, you would say, I'm going up to the temple. Anabino. Anabino is also a term used with reference to Jesus going up on the cross. Okay? So when he says, I am not yet going up to this feast, I'm not yet, at this feast, I'm not yet going up. I'm not going to die at this feast. I'm not yet, but it's also, I am not yet going up to this feast. Because for me, the right time has not yet come. Having said this, he stayed in Galilee. The family, oh, Jesus staying behind. He's a loser. There they go up. However, after his brothers left for the feast, he went also. Not publicly, kind of like throw a hood over his head, went to the inn and Brie, sat in the back, and waited for the hobbits to come. Secret, cloaked. Some of you get that Lord of the Rings reference. However, after his brothers had left for the feast, he went also, not publicly, but in secret. Hey, Jesus, heading down to Galilee. He's just an unknown pilgrim, Now at the feast, the Judean authorities were watching for him and asking, "Where's that man?" They're looking for him. He's like one of the 10 most wanted. And now his name's been brought up. The police have put an APB out on him. Keep an eye out, all eyes for Jesus of Nazareth. He's got scraggy hair, scraggy beard. He's about 5'2", known troublemaker, often with armed disciples. Be aware. Where is that man? Among the crowds, there was widespread whispering about him. Now you got to remember, you got to picture this, man. You got 80,000, 100,000 people in the temple alone. You've got perhaps as many as 500,000 to 1 million in Jerusalem for this feast. And these crowds are whispering about Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus of Nazareth. And word is getting whispered to the authorities. Temple guards overhear things, different people overhear things. They take it up the chain. There's lots of talk about this Jesus of Nazareth character. Where is that man? Is he here? Because we already know that Jesus knows they're planning to kill him. Among the crowds, there was widespread whispering about him. Some said, he's a good man. Here the Yohanan writer gives you a clue that there are some in the crowd, the ochlos, the people, that recognize that he's not the problem. He's a good man. No matter what you're going to say about him, he's a good man. Others replied, no, he planes the people. He deceives them. He leads them astray. And you've got to remember what happens to prophets in the book of Deuteronomy when they lead people astray. That's the language used here. Deceives them. We get our English word planet from the verb, and a planet has an elliptical rather than a spherical orbit. It's plane. It airs off the spherical into the elliptical. It deceives. He deceives the people. He leads them off the path. But no one would say anything publicly about him for fear of the authorities, for fear of the Judean authorities. So what do you have here? You have folks that know Jesus is a good man, but they're not going to take sides. Not until halfway through the feast did Jesus go up to the temple courts and begin to teach mid-feast. This is a long feast. It's an 8-day feast. So this is about day 4. Okay? But halfway through the feast, Jesus goes and he begins to teach. It says the Judeans were amazed and asked, "How?" Now this is where we want to take advantage of Joanne Brandt's work, because what's going to happen now is you're going to get into this pattern of question and answer, okay? And you're going to get into rebuttal and sarcasm, threat. There's just a lot of stuff that's going to be happening here, but this is, as it were, a piece of the courtroom drama opened up, okay? And so one of the things that was helpful in working through this text, again, was noting what Professor Brandt says about agon. Now, an agon is a literary type, okay? Yes, we get the word agony. Yeah, okay. But I want to read you her one-paragraph definition, and I'll throw in some of my own comments on this, because what you're going to get here in John 7, in this kind of courtroom setup, is an agon. That is, it's the voice of the victim, okay? Very, very important here. Now, here's what she says. Greco-Roman epics, tragedies, and histories frequently include an agon, a debate that imitates the standard oratorical and rhetorical features of the debates heard in courtrooms and political assemblies. So there's a form to debating. You learn that if you're in debate class in high school. You've got your affirmative, you've got your negative, you've got, how to put together an argument, you learn all of this. If you've been in court, you know that there's a structure and a format to the way the whole thing works. So she's saying that in the ancient world, there were these conventions, and this writer's using this particular convention that we find in, for example, Euripides' Media and Thucydides, his history. So she cites one playwright and one historian. She says in Homer's Iliad, now this is, again, 800 years before Jesus in Greece, the warriors fight with words more than swords. The agon includes long speeches that move through a series of legal, logical, or moral arguments. In some cases, the opponent responds with shorter speeches or ones of equal length. We'll see that here where Jesus replies and then the opponents are going to come back. The setting can be a formal trial or an interlude in the action, in which the losing side or victim is provided an opportunity to speak. Then she cites Elton T.E. Barker from a book in 2009, she says the purpose of a literary agon is to allow the audience to listen to the dissenting voice, which is often silenced in actual public life. Now, this is important on a number of levels. First, the first thing it does is it helps cement in me a certain doubt about the concept of revelation in the Bible. Let me put it this way. For a long time, you've heard me say that the biblical narrative, the Cain Abel narrative, is the first text to give voice to the victim. It's not necessarily true in my mind anymore, because we see the same phenomenon happening here, even as early as the Iliad, which is perhaps composed around the same time that written texts are being composed about Torah. Although the Abel narrative may be older, it doesn't matter. They're both germinating in Israelite and in Greek culture at the same time. Certainly, I doubt influenced at all by each other. Now, what this concept of agon does for me in Greek literature is it tells me that the Greeks were also beginning to see the importance of giving the dissenting voice, not just the Bible, but real voice to this victim. You'll notice that the dissenting voice in the Greek tradition is the loser, the voice of the loser. So it's there too, just as it is in the Cain Abel narrative, which again allows us to recognize why this author is just doing both Jewish and global, universal, non-Jewish connections all through this gospel, both woven together in this brilliant, brilliant style. Now, having said that, the thing that I think is important here is that it is the biblical revelation, it is the gospel text, it is the gospel itself that alone singularly points to the revelation of the forgiving victim, the forgiving God. That's singular to biblical revelation. That's why atonement is revelation. And revelation's atonement. When you see this, there's the connection. It's back. It's there. It's healed. Now, we move on. So we're in this agon. Now, we're going to be in this chapter 7 and 8. So keep this in mind. We're in this back and forth that's going to happen here. And we're going to be dealing with the exact same themes that we dealt with in chapter 5 with regard to Jesus' authority. Where does it come from? Halakha, who has the right to interpret the Torah. And you remember back then, Jesus said, you search the scriptures because you think you're going to find eternal life in them. No, they testify about me, but you won't come to me. You don't get it. Now, we're going to get even sharper criticism of Jesus in this chapter. You're going to see ad hominem attacks on his character. Again, another sign that you're dealing with victimage. Okay? Character attacks, getting public perception turned because of character attacks rather than facts, is a primary way that we see propaganda being used to frame or create in this sense, victims. Now, how did this man get such learning without having studied? This is their first question. This is their first question. All knowledge in the ancient world is filtered through authorities. You can see this in the Mishnah if you go to Aboth 1:1, where it talks about the fathers, Hillel and Shammai. But it begins going back from Moses to Ezra, to the men of the great synagogue, to these pairs, these 5 zizigis of rabbis, culminating in Hillel and Shammai, and then to the Amoraic rabbis. Well, gosh, you've got this chain, don't you? You see the same thing in Greek philosophy. Plato is a student of Socrates. Aristotle is a student of Plato. Bada, 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 boom. You see the same thing today. Who'd you study under? Who was your doctoral advisor? Where'd you go to university? Who's influenced you? How many footnotes can you write in a minute? You get this today. That is, what are your reference points? Well, who's your authority? Where's your authority come from? That's why people love. It's so funny to watch Christians. They quote N.T. Wright. N.T. Wright's my authority. N.T. Wright says it. N.T. Wright says it. It's my authority. It's like, yeah, but. If Tom ever listens to this, love your work, buddy. But Doug Campbell did supersede it. At any rate, here we go. So we have Jesus now about to establish his street creds, his creds in the courtroom. Okay, so here's what we have. They go, how did this man get this information? Where did it come from? Because he wasn't trained. He's not part of a tradition. He's not part of a, hey, I got this from so-and-so, I got this from so-and-so, No. This guy's come like out of nowhere. What Martin Hengel in his book calls the charismatic leader, the spirit-endowed leader. Again, you find these in Judaism. Jesus is not the only one. So you can see Martin Hengel's charismatic leader and his followers. That's a book. Jesus replies, my teaching, my didache, is not my own. I didn't fabricate this. I didn't create this. I have a chain. I got this from somewhere. It comes from him who sent me. There's your ambassadorship. There's your agency. Oh, okay, Jesus. Who sent you? If anyone chooses to do God's will, he will find out whether my teaching comes from God or whether I speak on my own. Now, here's the challenge. Okay, if you really choose to do God's will, you will find out whether I'm just saying my own thing. I invented this. Here's Jesus theology, folks, the brand new theology of the day. Yes, yours for $19.99. You can subscribe too. No, right? That's not Jesus. He's not creating anything. He's saying, look, I learned from someone. So you go learn from God. And if you really seek God, you'll find that I learned from God. He who speaks on his own does so to gain honor for himself. This is true. If you valorize yourself, claim your own authority, self-authorize, you're really not doing anything. Oh, don't you go down yet? Okay. And he says, he who speaks on his own does so to gain honor for himself. That's what they're accusing him of. You're speaking on your own, Jesus. Jesus acknowledges, that is, he's getting them to agree, the one who speaks on his own does so to gain honor for himself. That's it. We both agree on this, he's saying. But he who works for the honor of the one who sent him is a man of truth. That is, when the emissary, the agent, the ambassador, the one that's sent, is only concerned about the honor of the sender and preserving the integrity of the message that's given, Jesus says he's a man of truth. There's nothing false about him. There's no plan A. There's no deception here. And then he's going to come back has not Moses given you the law? And they're all going to say, yes. We already know that from John 1:18, the law came through Moses. He's getting them to agree, yeah, the law came through Moses. And then he says, yet not one of you keeps the law. Why are you trying to kill me? And this just drives the crowd batshit crazy. And they go, ooh, you're demon possessed. Who's trying to kill you, man? Here's what they can't see. As the mob, they cannot see this. They tried to make him king. This crowd, this ochlos, this crowd, humanity, would turn him into this deus ex machina savior to satisfy their own narcissistic, insatiable desires of power and glory and honor and fame and riches and wealth and everything else. He's not that. And he says, didn't Moses give you the law? They say, yeah. And he says, you're trying to kill me. And if you do that, that makes you a lawbreaker. And if Moses gave you the law, you're violating the law. So why are you accusing me of violating the law on the Sabbath for healing a person when you are doing the greater violation by seeking to kill me? Now, this crowd includes the religious authorities. It would include the disciples as well. It's an ochlos. It's a mob. Judeans were amazed. Where do you get this thinking? Didn't Moses give you the law? And then they just turn around. They look at him. You are demon possessed. That's where we think your authority comes from. We think your authority comes straight from hell, Jesus. The crowd replied, who is trying to kill you? From their perspective, they're looking around and going, you want to kill Jesus? No, I don't want to kill Jesus. You want to kill Jesus? No, I don't want to kill Jesus. Who's trying to kill you? Jesus said to them, I did one miracle, and you are all astonished. That's with direct reference back to the feeding of the 5,000. That's with direct reference back to the crowd wanting to make him king. It's as though, as I said, even though it says in verse 15, the Judeans, the Judean authorities were amazed, the audience of the 5,000 gets mixed into this as well. I did one miracle and you're all astonished. Or it refers back to John 5. Because it has to do with Jesus' authority and halakha. That's what I think. Now, here you have, I did one miracle and you're all astonished. Yet because Moses gave you circumcision. Now here we're back to the law. Here we're interpreting law. Okay, you guys say, Moses is the authority here. God gave Moses Torah. Moses handed it down. You all been copying it ever since. Yeah, you all got that. You got that. He says, Moses gave you circumcision. And then the writer does this interesting parenthesis here, whether it's he wants to put this in the mouth of Jesus or whether it's just his parenthesis, we'll leave aside. You can figure that one out. Though actually it did not come from Moses, but from the patriarchs. That is, it's almost as though you have a little dig here at Moses. There's an even greater authority to circumcision, but you say that Moses gave circumcision because Moses wrote Torah, but it's really from the patriarchs, who he's writing about. That's where the authority is on this. He says, although it actually did come from Moses, but from the patriarchs, Moses gave you circumcision. You circumcise a child on the Sabbath. What are you doing when you circumcise a child on the Sabbath? You're obeying the commandment to circumcise that child on the 8th day. If the 8th day falls on the Sabbath, that's when the child is circumcised. There you go. Bam, not a problem. Because God commanded it, that command supersedes the Sabbath command, and it can be done. Now, when he moves on to say, if a child can be circumcised on the Sabbath so that the law of Moses may not be broken, if you're going to allow for this, you're going to say, well, the Sabbath is a Sabbath, and here's how we're defining work, but circumcision is allowed because it's commanded, so therefore it kind of supersedes that Sabbath regulation and all these things that we think belong to it. If you're going to allow that, why are you angry at me for healing the whole person on the Sabbath. What is it circumcision does? Makes the person a member of the Jewish community, doesn't it? Here, Jesus is saying, I've not only taken this person and done better than you just by circumcising someone and they're a member of the community. Now I've turned him whole so that he can participate into the community. He doesn't have to sit by a pool like he did for 38 years. He gets to be a member of the human race. So why? Do you have a problem with that? Why do you have a problem with that? So stop judging on the surface, which is what they're doing. He says, make a right judgment. We're in a courtroom. We're already seeing that the witnesses are making false judgments. They've now made an ad hominem attack. You are demon-possessed, buddy. You're just, man, I'll tell you what. And Jesus fights back against that accusation. He's very, very clear that that his authority is not from the demonic or the dark side. It's from the light. It's from the Father. Now, at that point, some of the Jerusalemites, now we have this conversation taking place in the city. Who some of these Jerusalemites are, we don't know. But some of the people of Jerusalem begin to ask, as they're in the temple still, they're local, isn't this the man they're trying to kill? Now, isn't this interesting? How do they know that somebody's out to kill Jesus? Is it because Jesus said somebody's out to kill him? Well, you know, they haven't heard this. Jesus said that to his brother. So there's a plot afoot already. There's word been put out. And the locals know this word. And that's this Jesus of Nazareth is going down. Isn't this the man they're trying to kill? Isn't this the man they got to get rid of? Here he is speaking with parousia, openness, boldness, candor, frankness, just saying what it is. Now, at this point, I want to read to you about parousia. Again, this comes from Joanne Brandt. She has these wonderful little sidebars. They are really excellent. I can't recommend this commentary enough. It's great to have along with some of the historical critical commentaries and some of the great commentaries on the Gospel of John. Anyway, parousia. Remember when his brothers say, you need to go speak in Jerusalem with openness, candor, frankness, parousia, openly. Go openly here. And then it says, the crowd, here he is speaking with parousia, just saying it like it is. Okay. Later in the upper room discourse, Jesus says, I'm not going to speak to you anymore in parables, but with parousia. I'm going to be frank with you. Here it is. Here he is speaking with parousia, and they are not saying a word to him. Isn't this the man they're trying to kill? Here he is speaking with parousia, and they are not saying a word to him. Join Brett. The Greco-Roman world valued parousia, frank or candid speech, as a hallmark of a freeborn status. Slaves were not free to speak their minds. Citizens were. Tyranny deprived one of the freedom to speak. She cites here, I mean, she's been citing all along Euripides, Dionysius of Halicarnassus, Demosthenes, Plutarch. She'll cite Seneca later, and then, of course, some texts out of Acts and the Pauline letters. One's wisdom and virtue were measured in part by one's use of parousia. One did not hold the truth from friends, especially truthful criticism, but in public it was more judicious to be circumspect about what one said. Parousia is a gift of the Spirit. Pentecost appears on the list of Christian virtues. You'll certainly remember the Matthean phrase in the Sermon on the Mount, let your yes be yes, your no be no. Okay, just speak the truth, just leave it. Speak truthfully, candidly, bang, this is it. This is what the brothers are saying to Jesus. You go to Jerusalem, you just speak the truth, tell them the truth. Now here's the crowd going, isn't this the man they're trying to kill? Here he is speaking the truth, and no one's questioning it. Does this mean the authorities have concluded he's the Messiah? Maybe the crowd trusts the wrong impression because nobody's challenging Jesus. He's there. They think this is the one that's the plot against. He's speaking with absolute candor about, who his father is and who he's bearing witness to and where his honor comes from and all of this. And he's questioned their whole interpretation of Torah again, just like he does in John 5. And the crowd misunderstand him, and they say, but we know where this man is from. We know where he's from. And when the Christ comes, no one will know where he's from. But we know where he's from, but the Messiah, we won't know where he's from. And they think they've got it all figured out, but they really don't know where he is from. Even though he's been telling them where he's from, they're going, we know he's from Galilee, or we know he's from Bethlehem, or we know he's from Joseph and Mary. And Jesus is going, you don't know where I'm from. I'm from outside of your frame of reference. That's for sure. We know where this man is from. When the Christ comes, no one will know where he's from. And Jesus still teaching in the temple courts. It's this big temple, remember? Eighth wonder of the world and all that. I mean, it's big as 3 football stadiums long, all right? It's huge. It's massive. It's great. It's gilded and gold and colonnades and pillars and columns and marketplaces, and who knows, they might have even had a Ferris wheel. Jesus teaching in the temple courts cries out, yes, you know me, and you know where I am from. Here's your double meaning. Come on. I am not here on my own, but he who sent me is true. Now he's taking them from where they think they know he's from to where he's really from. I've been sent. This language of sending is both Johannine and Pauline. God sent his son in both Paul and John. There is a mission of the Father as there is a mission of the Son, as there's going to be a mission of the Spirit. I am not here on my own. He who sent me is true, not false, true. You do not know him. You don't know the one who's true. Why? Well, as we're going to see the next chapters, because they got a different father. Their father is the Diabolos. So they don't know Jesus' father. Jesus knows him because he's from him and he sent me. That is, that Jesus is saying, look, I know who I am. I know where I'm from. I know what I got. It's all good. At this, they tried to seize him. But no one laid a hand on him because his time had not yet come. He's able to get out of this. There's a shamanic interpretation I'd love to give here, but I won't do it right now. Because obviously you got the great empirical, liberal, historical, critical, logical, rational, scientific reading going, well, this is really just myth. He just kind of, the Hardin author wants us to believe that Jesus somehow docetically simply slipped through the crowds magically. No, they have never ever been in the wilderness. They have never done the exercises that one has to do for decades to learn about invisibility. They're getting through crowds by diminishing presence and all of this. They're clueless about that, so they think that they've got to explain it within their little worldview. At any rate, still many in the crowd put their faith in him. Now we've got this repetition. Remember from before, it said many in the crowd believed. Now again, many in the crowd put their faith in him. They said, when the Christ comes, will he do more miraculous samia than this man? This guy's done it all. Top-notch miracles, top-shelf miracles, man, water to wine, healing a nobleman's son from near death. He's healed a man that's laid in a place for 38 years. He's fed 5,000 people. I mean, we've seen other signs too. We've seen other ones. Remember, it's in Jerusalem, especially in John 2 and 4, he does these signs. The Pharisees heard the crowd whispering such things about him. Now again, you got to put yourself back in the temple. You're with little groups of people. They see Jesus. They hear about him. They're talking about him. They're talking about Jesus of Nazareth. The one who did these incredible signs. Is this the guy? Is this the time? Why are we here? What do we think about? He's a good man. They're whispering. The Pharisees are walking around, eavesdropping. Sure they are. They may not have had parabolic listening ears and all that stuff, or they may not have been able to parse the internet like we do, and all your data is known, but they were out there. They were listening. The Pharisees heard the crowd whispering such things about him. This is important. They're Pharisees. We're dealing with separatists here. Then the chief priests, Sadducees, and the Pharisees, together, they make this decision together, send temple guards to arrest him. Here we go. It's about to happen. The time is about to come. We're going to get to the passion narrative. Decision is made in the courts there in the temple. Boom, boom, we're taking this action. Somebody communicates it to the captain of the temple guard, who sends the temple guard out into the temple to arrest Jesus. Jesus says to the crowd, now, as this is happening, you've got this kind of dual action. So it's like you're watching a movie, you know, and we have one sequence happening with one group of people and another sequence following it, but they're simultaneous. This is simultaneous action, okay? It's just in paragraphs as we would see scenes in a movie, but they're simultaneous. Jesus said, I am with you for only a short time. And then I go to the one who sent me. You'll look for me, but you won't find me. And where I am, you cannot come. Now that's going to puzzle the crowd, just like it puzzles you. And the Judeans, they said to one another, where does this man intend to go? That we can't find him. Well, because remember, now, I'm going to go away, you can't find me. There's this other thing going on. There's these temple guards coming down into the crowds now, aren't they? What are they doing? They are looking for Jesus. They're trying to find him. And Jesus is going, where I'm going, you're not going to find me. You can't go there. Only I can go there. You can't get there. Where does he intend to go? We can't find him. Is he going to move to Europe? Is he getting a boat, traveling somewhere? Will he go where our people live scattered among the Greeks? Is he going to go out among the diaspora Jews? It's just like, we know he's a liberal man. They probably flourish out there. Is he going to go out among the diaspora Jews? Is he going to head to Alexandria or Ephesus or Rome? Where's he going? Is he going to go live scattered among the Greeks and teach the Greeks? Boom, here it is. Bam. Because in John 12, you're going to get this phrase again, where the Greeks come to Philip and say, hey, we want to see Jesus. And Jesus says, my hour's come. So they're now already speculating. He said, this is not my time. And they're going, is he going to go teach the Greeks? Is that what he's going to do? What did he mean when he said, you'll look for me, you won't find me, and where I am, you cannot come? What did he mean? If you think you know what he meant, you don't get it yet, because you can't know what it meant. You're not that far in the gospel yet. You don't know what he means. Where I'm going, you can't go. We don't know what he's talking about. If you go, oh, he's talking about heaven and all that. Earth to you. Read the gospel. Be careful. I'm going to stop here. It's a natural stopping point. I'm at 58 minutes, and the next text, of course, is probably going to take another hour. John 7, 37 to 39 is one, or even to the end of the chapter. So let me say thanks to everybody that joined. Hey, Ron, say hi to Linda. Nate, hi. Hey, Rob Grayson, good to see you, dude. Lisa, Rick again. Paul Holgate from York, dude. Missed that city. Yeah. All right, man. Love you too, bro. Peace and love, everybody. Hope you're enjoying these studies on the Gospel of John. Again, a reading done through multiple lenses: mimetic theoretical, historical critical, literary rhetorical, and theological, that uses multiple lenses, but sees this one major theme, right? This one major theme. Brandt's book is titled just John. Let's see if I can get to the table of contents. That's not helpful. There we go. What is it called? It's called John by Joanne Brandt Baker Academic, 2011. So Joanne Brandt, B-R-A-N-T, Baker Academic, 2011. Excellent book. Look forward to seeing you next time. Later on this week, we'll certainly talk about water, spirit, and blood. All right, man. Peace and love. Have yourself a great day.